Hello and welcome to part 2 of Learning the Law, our deep dive into the First Amendment. Our live podcast on Twitch this week was a little bit longer than we anticipated, so we split it up for you wonderful people who like to listen so that it's not too terribly long for you. Learning the Law is a podcast about all things legal with a focus on current events where we try to teach you things in 1 hour. My name is Ashley, aka Phoenix Nymphy, and my co-host who is the man of the hour, my husband, Ron. He's the one with all the knowledge. This podcast is purely educational and should not be taken as legal advice. This podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship. This podcast is based on his interpretation of relevant law, and any opinions expressed are the opinions of the individual making them and do not reflect any opinions of any firm, company, or other individuals. Ron is a licensed practicing attorney in the state of California, and he would be very sad if I did not remind you, since September of 1999. Enjoy the podcast.
The next thing, going in with the obscenity.
Yeah.
It's its own category, child pornography.
Okay. All right. And we are back from our break. Obscenity. Okay. We were talking about violence, obscene violence, and pornography. And now we are talking about child pornography.
Right.
Okay. So
there is absolutely no right to produce, read, possess child porno.
Even in a political spectrum.
Even in a political situation.
Even if you are an artist and you draw a child pornographically, even if you didn't use a child subject, you just draw a child, that is considered obscene.
That might be considered obscene. It will not be considered child pornography.
Okay.
Because it has to involve actual children.
Okay. Okay. Now, if you have a reference, say, even if it's just a picture reference.
What do you mean by reference?
Well, a lot of artists use references to create their artwork. So yes. If you have, even if they're not nude, but you're drawing from a child's picture, and then you create the nude, would that be considered child pornography?
Most of the statutes actually say photographs or videos.
Okay.
You may make the argument for it. That would be one of those that goes all the way up
to the Supreme Court.
To the Supreme Court. If all you did was a picture or an artwork of a nude child, as opposed to artwork of nude children having sex.
Okay. The pornography part different. Comes in. I mean, but pornography is nudity, correct?
Pornography is generally sexual in nature.
Okay. So okay. Interesting.
That's why you can have, say, diaper commercials on TV that are showing little kids' butts.
Even though some people are, bleh.
They've stopped that for the most part. I don't think they show little kids' butts anymore.
No, I've seen little kid booties. They're adorable. Okay.
They used to.
I've seen little kid booties in like TV and stuff like that, and but like it's always the booty. It's never anything more.
Right. There's a famous statue in Belgium called the Mannequin Piece, which shows a little kid peeing.
Yes, I know which one you're talking about.
Right. Now, in the U.S., would that be considered child pornography? No.
No, I don't think. No, because, I mean, that's something that children with penises do often, is pee into random things. My little brother would pee off of the side of the trampoline all the time. It's just a part of growing up with a penis. I mean, Rule 34 exists because you can sexualize anything if you really try. But you are a disgusting person if you try to sexualize everything. I mean, seriously. Especially when it comes to children.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they shouldn't broaden that a little bit. Because I mean,
I would go so far as to say this would trump any religious freedom as well.
Right, because Catholic priest sexually harassing children is not okay.
Well, there is an organization called NAMBLA.
Oh, we've addressed these people. Yes, this is something I just recently learned. Thank you, TikTok. I had no idea this existed. Okay, I'm gonna let you explain it because you know it more because I'd never heard of it before.
NAMBLA is the North American Man-Boy Loving Association. That's what it stands for. Unlike the South Park episode where it was the North American Marlon Brando Look-Like Association. They've been around for decades. And they advocate sex between adult males and underage boys.
Which is...
Now, could that turn into a church? Certainly could.
It's disgusting. That's harming children.
Would they then have the religious liberty to practice their beliefs? I would say no. They still
shouldn't. They shouldn't. And for the record, they consider themselves part of the LGBTQ community. However, we don't claim them at all. They are not LGBTQ community. They are disgusting.
Likewise, another sexual content-laden pornography that would always be considered obscene that I don't have on the list here is bestiality.
Ugh. Having sex with animals.
Yes.
Why?
I don't think there's any community in the US that has a community standard that that's okay.
Just why? Just anyway. So I'm so distracted by the disgustingness. Okay, so I want to actually backtrack to NAMBLA a little bit because historically, there is a historical precedence to the idea of adult males having sex with child males. In the Greek culture, what is it? Greek Roman culture? Because I believe the Romans did it as well.
Romans did as well, but it was very, very big in the ancient Greek culture.
I mean, I believe Socrates was one of the children. One of the big philosophers was actually one of the children. So they're what did they call? They called them what is it called when you are like a blacksmith and you take on
Apprentice?
Yes, apprentice. Okay. They would take on apprenticeships, and basically what they would do is they would take these young males and they would teach them whatever they're teaching them, but they would also use them as a sex slave, and that's what they called their apprenticeships. And I believe now I gotta look it up. It's called, according to Wikipedia, it's called pederasty, which is the sexual relationship between an adult male, and a pubescent or adolescent boy. I cannot remember, but I feel like one of the big three philosophers was someone who they either did it.
They know Aristotle or Socrates.
Yeah, they either did it or it was done to them. I cannot remember.
Oh.
But regardless, I mean, it doesn't matter. But it is something. It is something that it has existed for millennia. But it's not. I don't know why it. I don't know why it came about. That is one thing I don't know. I don't know why it came about. I don't know why it was a thing.
Couldn't tell you. Doesn't have anything to do with the First Amendment, though.
No, sorry. Talking about NAMBLA, I think that's where they base their stuff off of, is that just because it happened in the past doesn't mean it should happen now. Slavery doesn't exist anymore. Well, it does in a form, but it shouldn't.
You used to be able to get married at 13.
Right. Like they're just because it happened back then doesn't mean it should happen now. And that's the point I was trying to make. Anyway, moving on. Sorry.
Moving on.
I was going down a rabbit hole. I apologize.
The last area of these quote low speech exceptions is commercial advertising. You can't say anything you want in an advertisement, which is why you get false advertising prosecutions.
Like the bait and switch kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. You can't say, drink my snake oil, it will cure cancer. You can't say that unless you have actual proof. And so when it comes to speech in the commercial marketing, there is much less protected speech than there is in the private person, speech department.
Okay, say that again, please.
Yeah. Speech advertising. I'll put it in the nutshell of the note. Speech advertising a product or service is constitutionally protected, but not as much as other speech. For instance, the government can ban misleading commercial advertising, but it can't ban misleading political speech.
So what if the president claims a specific drug does something that it doesn't do?
That's not commercial advertising.
Okay. But I mean,
well, that was political speech.
Yeah, it was political speech. And it was wrong, and it was a lie. Like,
yeah,
the hydro whatever it was is not, or even saying go drink bleach and it'll help you. Like,
right.
Trump said a lot of things while he was president. If any other person said that kind of stuff, would they be under fire for that?
Because Trump said it, it's pretty much presumed to be political in nature.
Absolutely, because just like you don't stop being the president.
Said the same thing,
right?
If if a private person said that, and people did go to the hospital ingesting bleach, you could be sued.
What about that doctor that claimed the same stuff that he was spewing? Like, he was taking it from that one doctor. The lady who was like, I'm a doctor and this is da 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 da. What Fauci is saying is wrong. And like, she came out and like, she made some kind of documentary about like how Fauci is so wrong. And it was so full of just, she got ripped to shreds. But she was like, I don't even remember. I just remember it was like hydrochloride something or
Right.
other. Because my mother believed it. She's like, well, so and so went and had some and it cured da 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 da. And I'm like, okay. Like, I didn't argue with her. It was not worth my time to argue. But is that doctor not advertising essentially?
The doctor doesn't produce the drug. The doctor, as far as we know, does not get any money for selling the drug. So it's not commercial advertising.
Okay. So it would have to be like bleach coming out and saying, drink bleach and it will cure your COVID.
Right.
Gotcha. Which they actually came out and said, don't drink bleach.
Right. Please don't drink our product.
Please don't ingest our product. Interesting. Okay. Would she be okay, so in talking about freedom of speech, would she be under scrutiny under any of these laws, under any of these particular regulations when it comes to free speech then?
Fauci probably could have sued her under the defamation, and she would not have been protected.
So she can just outright lie and say stuff because of the freedom of speech, and people can die listening to her, and she doesn't get held accountable?
Not unless someone wants to sue her.
Okay, so somebody would have to file a lawsuit against her.
Yeah, she's not a government actor.
Okay. Interesting.
Government can't regulate her speech.
Could the government sue her? Because I know I'm kind of going out on a limb here, but stay with me for a moment.
Okay. I'll look at the tree and the limb you're on.
She helped push a narrative that ended up blackballing and slowing down the process of helping get people the COVID vaccine. It slowed down the process of care. It helped overload the hospitals as a whole, and in turn damaged the integrity of Dr. Fauci, who is a governing official, but also affected the government trying to actually benefit the people because of her perpetuating these QAnon conspiracy theories. Could the government essentially go after her and other people who continue to perpetuate these conspiracy theories because of the fact that it slows down their processes in trying to help get people safe and stop people dying?
That would be a very difficult lawsuit to win, and the government would have to have standing to do it, which it probably does not.
You see where I'm going, though?
But the people that have been damaged by it,
I guess because the government hasn't been directly damaged, even though, like, they're trying to help. Interesting. But you see where
yeah,
I'm going with that, right?
yeah, I see where you're going with
Because
that.
it's like, what do they call it? You're in, what do the cops call it when you are blocking the cops from doing their jobs?
Obstruction.
Yes, obstruction. Could you not consider that obstruction?
Well, not in a criminal
Right. Okay.
aspect, but you could go forward on wrongful death, possibly.
You help perpetuate these
You're going to have to prove that what she said was a direct link to the death of your
of
uh,
these 600,000
relative.
people.
You're looking at 600,000 different lawsuits.
Right. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Okay. Moving on. I know that would be a case that would be ridiculous, but
It would definitely be a class action.
yeah, nothing would happen other than just putting her in jail because she's not going to be able to pay for 600,000 people.
Right. Yeah. And you're not going to be put in jail for a civil action.
Yeah, that's the situation where I want her to go to jail and people like her to go to jail.
So basically, that is the quote low value speech that can be
Regulated.
restricted.
It can
Yeah.
be, it's
Restricted and
regulated, but it's not outright stopped. There are
Some of it is.
some of it is, but there's a thin line with some of it.
Right. Outside of these areas that we've just discussed, most any other restriction based on content of speech is unconstitutional.
Mm-hmm.
Entertainment, vulgarity, hate speech, bigoted speech, blasphemy that offends people's religions, violent video games, all cannot be restricted.
So you have the right to be a racist.
You do have the right to be a racist.
I wouldn't advise it.
You have the right to speak bad about evangelicals. Evangelicals have the right to speak bad about people who are Satanists.
Yeah, you have the right to hate people, but you also have the right to love them. So, you know,
Yeah, and just because you have the right doesn't mean you should,
right.
use it.
Right. And that's another thing that people need to keep in mind. Yeah, you have the right to be hateful, but why? Ask yourself why. Why do you want to be hateful? What's the point of being hateful? What purpose does that serve? What good does that do in being hateful towards someone? And that's a hypothetical. I can't answer that question for you. Ron can't answer that question for you. Only you can answer that question. You have the right to do these things. Just because you have the right to do them doesn't mean you should. Just because what's the famous quote? You were too busy asking yourself whether or not you could do this. You didn't ask yourself whether or not you should.
Right.
And that's what it boils down to. So the government, so according to this little thing, the government can restrict speech under a less demanding standard.
When the speaker has a special relationship to the government,
Okay.
like a teacher or a cop or the CDC or the head of the CDC.
Hmm.
An example of this would be government employees, students in public school. They can be restricted based on content when their speech is incompatible with their status as public officials. And an example would be, say, a teacher in a public school could be punished by the school board for encouraging students to experiment with illegal drugs.
But what if the teacher is like drinking, off duty with some friends and just having a good time?
Um, that in and of itself is not speech,
Okay.
and uh, the school boards have punished such things
Mm-hmm.
under a morals clause generally.
Okay. Well, that's a different topic for a different day.
Yeah. And
Um,
like a government employee who has access to classified information can be prohibited from disclosing that information.
right. Oh yeah. Like, yeah.
So that's speech that can also be restricted.
What if the teacher is like at a Black Lives Matter rally?
She has the right to do it.
Okay. As long as
Uh,
she's not
she
promoting it to her children on the job.
Right, and she's not
Okay.
at the Black Lives Matter shouting, "I'm a teacher at," uh, I don't know, Sylvanus High School. You know,
Okay. Just okay. So okay. All right. So it's like as long as you're not promoting, hey, I'm a teacher at this person. Can you say I'm a teacher? Yes, but not where you work. Like I'm a
Yeah,
lawyer,
you can do
yes,
that.
but I'm not going to tell you what firm I work at.
Right.
Okay. All right. I respect that.
Similar to me.
Yeah. Because that actually explains why you can't, because of things within your firm that I will not discuss. But yeah, that actually explains to me more about why they are very specific about their policy, about that policy. Because that makes sense, because then you're restricting the teacher from their freedom of speech, period. So as long as you don't like bring it to, the school, like, because civil rights, there is a difference in teaching it versus like trying to influence, I guess, your students to agree with you. It's actually, would the critical race theory thing kind of fall under that? Is that because I feel critical race theory needs to be taught, because there's so like I didn't know about Juneteenth until 2 years ago. There are like, and I didn't understand a lot of the stuff, a lot of the racial tensions and a lot of the racial stuff until I became an adult and learned it in college, right? I didn't learn our true history until college. And I feel lied to personally. I feel lied to that I didn't learn a lot of the things I learned in that I should have learned in school. I guess it is a political thing right now, but like if a teacher wanted to, do they not get a right to choose how they present? Like if you're a history teacher, you teach out of the book, but like I had teachers also teach beyond the book when I was in high school.
And they can be punished for it.
Because they're not staying with the curriculum.
Correct. And there are so many different school boards around the country. What would go on in one district is not going to be allowed in another district.
Right. Because like I know that like Lizzo is from Texas, and somehow she learned about Juneteenth in school. And I'm just like, one, being from Texas and learning about it, that's surprising to me, because I didn't even know it was a thing. Because I'm also from the South. It was just I never learned about Juneteenth until literally 2 years ago. I did not know it was a thing. And I'm still learning about it and reading about it. Because I was watching one of her TikToks and she's like, this is something we all learn about in school, but we need to go further. And I'm like, no, not all of us learned about it because not every school district teaches the same thing. And that's why you have 38 states who have passed a law saying they won't teach or something like that. Critical race theory.
Yeah, I believe something like that.
So, like, is that political? Is that against free speech, or is it?
Is it political? Yes. If you don't like it, you can vote those school board members out, possibly run for school board yourself.
Yeah.
But as long as the school board has those in place, then the teacher can't go against it and be protected.
Interesting. Huh. That's very interesting. Now, if the if federally we passed a law that said this is now a part of the education in the country, do they have to teach it?
If it's a federal law, they would have to teach it. You're going to get years and years of litigation on that.
I think our education should not be based off of the state. It should be based off of federal. I think because so many states because you get the level of education is so different state by state. It's so different county by county that it needs to be nationalized and everyone needs to be learning the same thing. All the kids need to be learning the same thing, in my opinion. I think the education should be not a state's thing. It should be a federal decision.
But it's not a state's thing. It's generally a county thing.
Yeah. And I think that's why our education sucks in this country. It's something that shouldn't be so localized.
The federal government could base their funding on your curriculum.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the states do. That's why you have so many. The No Child Left Behind thing actually emphasized the whole. It actually created a larger gap between your low income schools versus your higher income schools. It actually expanded that gap. Thank you, George Bush. It's a terrible program. Anyway, moving on. I know I don't have kids, but education is important to me, and I think children are the future, and that is why it is a hot topic for me. So the government can also restrict speech under a less demanding standard when it does so without
without regard to the content or message of the speech.
Okay.
That's called content neutral restrictions.
Okay, what does this mean?
That's a restriction on things like noise, blocking traffic, large signs.
Okay.
As long as they are considered reasonable and applied neutrally to all speakers, regardless of their message. I'll give an example. Pacific Amphitheater in Orange County, California, where I saw my first concert, which was Oingo Boingo and X.
Nice.
I just thought I'd throw that in there, has a restriction on noise after, I believe it's 9:00.
Can't do a concert then.
It's really hard now. It might be 10.
Is it because it's in the middle of a neighborhood?
It's in the middle of residential neighborhood.
Oh,
and you
okay.
can hear that concert for a long distance.
So it's probably best to do a daytime concert there.
Yeah.
Fair
and
enough.
That's one of the venues of Orange County State Fair.
Okay.
But back in the day, they would have concerts till 11 o'clock at night. But, as long as you say that there are no concerts, period, that restriction will be upheld.
Oh, but you can't just say there's no concerts for rock, but you can do jazz.
Right.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, that makes sense to me. I can understand that, especially when it's in like a residential neighborhood. Yeah, I don't want to be up until 1 o'clock in the morning because of a concert. That's why concert venues tend to be, you know,
you can have
not in residential neighborhoods.
On the size of billboards, for example.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to distract the driver with, some huge, football field size billboard.
Right. So what about the blocking traffic thing? Is that like what if you were in like a walk and you're blocking traffic? Like those people that
you can get prosecuted for that.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
because
disruptive.
You're not. It is disruptive. You are not restricting a particular message of the speech. You are saying that absolutely no one in any protest can block traffic.
So, okay. So say you're letting traffic go through, but it's very slow. That's not considered blocking traffic.
It probably still would be.
Really interesting. Do they tend to prosecute on that?
I think Georgia did.
Really? Because I mean, that's part of a protest is to disrupt and be seen.
I believe during the Vietnam War, there were people that were arrested for sit-ins.
Oh yeah. I mean, during the civil rights movement, they were arrested for sitting at a counter. So
right.
But
now you can argue that that's not content neutral. Sitting at a counter,
right?
That was reserved for white people while you're a black person.
Yeah,
that doesn't seem content neutral to me. That is symbolic political speech.
Because you're sitting at a white person's counter as a black person.
Right. Or drinking out of the whites only faucet.
Yes.
To me, that's a political statement as much as burning the flag is.
Yeah. Okay. Hush, dog. Oh my God. He really wants us to end this podcast.
But just blocking traffic in and of itself is not really the same as burning the flag or sitting at that counter.
Okay. I think I kind of understand that now. I think I can kind of understand that. Like, no protest is allowed to block traffic, regardless of what your content is.
It does have to be viewed as a reasonable restriction.
Right. So again, another kind of subjective situation, but with a bit more finite rules and understanding.
Like it wouldn't be reasonable if they said there can be no political demonstrations at Griffith Park.
Right.
That's not going to be held up.
Right, because it's public. You should be allowed to go there and do your.
Yeah. You can't pass out leaflets on the sidewalk.
Okay.
Not reasonable.
Because you're not harming anybody. You're not just really disrupting anything.
Right.
You're disrupting their day for like 2 seconds. a little bit different from blocking traffic, though. I do understand that. So what is so I guess we're almost at the end of this. Let's wrap. I guess courts have not always been the protective of speech. You mean this protective of free expression
or free speech? Yeah.
Okay.
There used to be laws that allowed punishment for blasphemy. If you insulted a person's religion, or if you were promoting crime or condemning the draft, you could be punished for that. And it wasn't until the 60s. It started in the 20s where they started it being a little bit more protective of speech, but it was really the 60s that they began to interpret it more broadly.
Peace, love.
Yeah.
Yeah,
especially the civil rights movement.
The hippie and civil rights are what really kind of. So why do you think they changed that interpretation?
Because generally in the 20s,
because women before women got the vote, the women were arrested and told to shut up, and it was bad. It was bad. Just like with the civil rights movement, it was not good. They were told they didn't have the right to speak on these things. And technically, we still don't have the right to a lot of things.
In the 20s going into the 30s, you had the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
You had a lot of civil unrest. You had a lot of
people criticizing the government.
And rightly so.
Right.
You had a lot of unions trying to organize and gain some rights. And all of that led to a broadening of the speech.
Okay. Progress. So, yeah.
Had they not, and the Supreme Court in their rulings, they will look at political ramifications from time to time.
Well, I mean, you kind of explained that in the last episode about their decision on the Affordable Care Act. We kind of actually talked about that. That would cause a lot of political ramifications if they voted against the Affordable Care Act.
Right. All of a sudden, 20 million Americans wouldn't have insurance.
Right. So
that would have caused tremendous turmoil.
Yeah.
In the healthcare field.
Sorry about the dog.
He's disagreeing with me, But back in the 20s and such, if they hadn't allowed these people who were victims of the Depression or victims of extreme capitalism in the unions, if they had not let them broaden their speech and protect it somewhat, you would have had a lot more violence.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the justices knew that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the more I'm learning about the Supreme Court and the more we're getting into this, the more I actually respect that entity. Even if I don't agree with a lot of their political alliances. It's a lot. That's a lot to do and have to. Those are big things when it hits the Supreme Court. That's regardless of where you lie on the political spectrum, there's a lot you have to think about when it comes to making these decisions.
And everybody thinks that the Supreme Court doesn't have an appeal process. And generally they don't. You can't appeal the Supreme Court to another court. It's up to Congress to change poor decisions from the Supreme Court.
Has that ever happened?
When certain things happen, like the Voting Rights Act or the Civil Rights Act back in '64, changed a ton of Supreme Court decisions.
Oh, really?
You know.
Huh. Well, we will end it there. We've been going for quite a while, although we did have a couple of breaks this podcast. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. So remember, if you have any questions, shoot them to us.
Yeah.
We love your questions. This is part 1 and 2 of this mini series, going in depth about the First Amendment. We talk about freedom of speech, and next time we will discuss another section of the First Amendment.
It'll be the religion.
It'll be the religious aspect of the of the First Amendment. So stick around. Come back next week. We'll discuss it again live on Twitch. Both parts. Both 1 and 2. I will split this up, but we're gonna put them both up at the same time, so you'll get a double dose of learning the law this week on the on the audio portion. But thank you so much for listening to Learning the Law. If you like this podcast and want to hear more, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share in all your favorite places. You can find it hosted on Twitch at Twitch TV, live on Twitch at twitch.tv/PhoenixNymphy. Don't forget to use the hashtag Learning the Law on all your favorite social media sites, and you'll be able to find more there. You can find Ron on Twitter at Necrokijo. That's NECROKIJO, and me on most social media platforms at Phoenix Nymphy. If you have any questions, please tweet, comment, or email us at twolazydogsmedia@gmail.com. This has been a Two Lazy Dogs production.
Hi, everyone.